When I started working on immigration, this was 10 years ago, and my husband was not happy about this at all. And he said to me, "Oh, Jonette, do you have to put your head in this hornet's nest? This is so contentious. Can't you take on some more traditional liberal goal like hunger or something, you know, world peace or something like this? This one, you have to, I mean, I don't see how we're going to explain it to all our liberal friends. They are never going to understand." So my husband was right. 10 years ago, it was very hard to explain why a liberal is working to restrict immigration. So at the time, he decided, he said, "Okay, if you're going to do this cause, then my job is to be your backup team, and I'm going to make certain that you never speak beyond the facts. And I will do all the documentation so that what you write and what you say, you don't speak beyond the facts. And by the way, if anybody hears anything that they don't think is accurate, please let me know, because I really am concerned. That's the standard I really want to hold myself to." Things have changed in 10 years, and there are many more liberals getting interested in this cause. I have people contacting me that held their noses 10 years ago. So there are some important changes happening. And my hope for tonight is that some of you will become more curious and start to do some reading and thinking on your own and get involved. This is not a cause that we should leave to conservatives. For our country, we need liberals involved in this cause. Thank you for coming. So, let's get started. A nation is a family, and like all families, we sometimes have to talk about subjects that are uncomfortable, that we wish we didn't have to talk about. And those topics are lurking in many parts of the world. Women's rights, AIDS, female genital mutilation, child slavery, prostitution, and in all its many varieties, the ethnic and racial frictions that have plagued so many human families. America has been somewhat unique in our willingness to tackle contentious subjects, and over the course of our history, we have periodically put ourselves through a self-examination process when we look ourselves in the mirror and make the changes that we know we need to make. Where else in the world has a country spent 4 decades in a civil rights movement examining itself from top to toe to rid itself of racism? And we also put ourselves through a labor movement, a very troubling and divisive period in our history, a women's movement, an environmental movement, a gay rights movement. And in every one of these periods, we had to challenge the status quo and face down the elites that did not want us to have those conversations and did not want us to make the changes that we knew we needed to make. These moments when we have looked within to put our house in order, to become more clear about our values as a nation, have been some of our finest, when we have inspired ourselves and astonished the world. So I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging this church for your willingness to host a really thoughtful examination of the immigration issue, which is going to go beneath the sound bites, the stereotypes, and the shallow slogans that have driven the media coverage of immigration for 30 years and shaped the legislation that we've had for 30 years. Now, we Americans are keenly aware of what a great blessing it was to be born in this country. And for this reason, it is very uncomfortable to talk about restricting someone else's opportunity to do for their family what our ancestors were able to give to us. But the fact is, we live in a world where 1 billion people live on less than $2 a day. And the population doubling rate for that group of people is about 30 years. And we simply cannot accept everyone who's willing to work hard and make a better life. And so, that means we need to set a limit. But what should that limit be? And there's the rub. Should it be 200,000 a year? 800? A million? 2 million? 5 million a year? The Premier of China told President Carter that he could send us 10 million people a year for decades, if that's what we wanted. But the undeniable fact is this: we must choose some number. And any discussion of immigration must eventually address these three basic questions. How many immigrants should we accept? What criteria do we use for choosing them? And what is the most humane way to enforce our laws? As a family, we need to come together and listen to each other and work for consensus and think very carefully about the decisions we make, because we are charting a course for the future, and we need to weigh the long-term best interests of all Americans, immigrant as well as native-born and future generations as well. So we need to weigh the interests of many in deciding what is the wisest course for our family. Now, every speaker on immigration comes with certain core convictions. And when you know the core convictions of your speaker, it helps you understand how she comes to the conclusions she does. So I'm going to begin with my own. And here they are. My first conviction is that we need to have a lawful immigration system which sets limits and enforces those limits, just as we had throughout most of the 20th century, just as every other country in the world has. Our current situation is unique. Most countries in the world have extremely restricted immigration systems. There's only a handful of countries that receive any number of immigrants at all. The United States and Canada together accept more immigrants every year than all other countries in the world combined. And that fact comes from Mark Krikorian, who is the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies. But even though our generosity has been breathtaking on an international scale, it doesn't mean that we're not entitled to set any limit on behalf of our own citizens. Now, many people in Washington today, both neocons and liberals, no longer believe that we should set any limit at all. When George Bush said in January 2006, he said, let's just allow any willing worker, was his phrase, any willing worker in the world to connect with an American employer. He was articulating a view that is widely held among the business elites in America today. Now, to give you an idea of this demographic, any willing worker, think of the person that does the lowliest work in America today, the people who clean the bathrooms, the people who wash the toilets, and who make the sandwiches. Their wages in America are 12 times what the wages are in Mexico, and there are 4.6 billion people on the planet that make less than Mexicans. Now, the American people heard these comments from Bush, and they were not fooled. His popularity took a nosedive in the polls, and Bush was fiercely criticized within the Republican Party. But interestingly enough, Democratic Party leadership received these comments from President Bush very warmly, and they said, fine, they were open to this. Their only problem with what Bush suggested is that it didn't go far enough, meaning it didn't offer a path to citizenship for all those willing workers. So the very first question to ask any politician on immigration or any speaker is, do you think there should be any limit at all? And if so, what number? I've asked that question a lot. You have an interesting experience asking that question.